The house was too quiet for a mansion of its size. Rain tapped softly against the towering glass windows, and Ben Thompson, a man whose name commanded respect in every tech boardroom in Silicon Valley, couldn't shake the strange heaviness in his chest. He had everything people spend their lives chasing: wealth, power, influence. Yet at that moment he felt hollow, staring at the platinum card in his hand, thinking about the one woman who had used it not for luxury, but for something that would break his heart wide open. He thought he understood people, their ambitions, their greed, their carefully hidden motives. But what Lisa Washington, his cook, chose to buy with his card was something he would never forget. Before we dive deeper into this powerful story, if you believe in the quiet strength of human kindness, in second chances, and the hidden battles people fight in silence, then please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel. Every share helps us tell more stories that remind us of the goodness still left in this world. Thank you. Let's get back to the story properly. Ben Thompson had been known in Silicon Valley's elite circles as the man who never bent, never gave ground, never made decisions with his heart. His empire had been built line by line through brilliant code and ruthless business instincts, forged in the fires of corporate warfare and personal betrayal. His wife had left him years ago, taking half his fortune and whatever warmth had once existed between them. His son refused his calls, blaming him for choosing algorithms over family dinners, investors over Little League games. Now he lived alone in a mansion that hummed with technology but echoed with emptiness, save for the quiet movements of his small household staff. And among them was Lisa Washington, a woman in her late 30s who moved through his home with dignity and grace despite her modest position. She never complained, never asked for favors beyond her wages, and worked with precision that bordered on devotion, keeping his sterile world spotless while fading into the background like morning mist. But Ben was not blind to details. Details were how he'd built his empire. He noticed things others wouldn't. He noticed how Lisa's hand sometimes trembled when she thought no one was watching, how her uniform was always immaculate, but her shoes worn thin at the heels, carefully maintained but years past their prime. He noticed how she wrapped leftover meals with particular care, never wasteful, always purposeful. Once he caught her standing motionless in his music room, staring at his grand piano with tears welling in her eyes before she quickly wiped them away and returned to her duties. There was a sadness about her, a weight she carried with quiet strength, though she never spoke it. The turning point came on a Tuesday evening when Ben returned home earlier than usual. He found Lisa in the kitchen, her back to him, speaking urgently into her phone. Her usually composed voice trembled with barely controlled fear as she whispered fragments he wasn't meant to hear. Treatment schedule, hospital said, please, I'm begging you, not yet. When she ended the call, she wiped her tears with swift, practiced movements and turned, only to freeze when she saw her employer standing in the doorway. She stammered an apology, humiliation coloring her face. But Ben, for reasons he couldn't fully explain, felt something stir beneath the armor he'd worn for so long. For the first time in years, he felt compelled to do something, not because it made strategic sense, not because it would yield returns, but out of raw, unexplainable human compassion. The next morning, without asking questions that might strip her dignity, he placed his black titanium credit card on the marble counter. Take it, he said in his usual measured tone. Buy whatever you need. Lisa froze, staring at the card as though it might burn her fingers. Sir, I can't possibly. No questions, Ben interrupted with quiet finality. No explanations. Just do what you need to do. Lisa took it with trembling hands, tears glistening in her eyes as she whispered a thank you that felt like a prayer. Ben expected her to use it for overdue bills, maybe groceries, perhaps something small for herself. A brief escape from whatever burden she carried. Part of him, the part hardened by years of betrayal, even wondered cynically if she might indulge in something frivolous, something human. Everyone had their price, their moment of weakness. He'd learned that lesson 1,000 times over in boardrooms and courtrooms. But 3 days later, the notification arrived. Ben was reviewing code architecture when his phone buzzed with the bank alert. He opened it absently, expecting the usual automated payments, subscription services, the background noise of wealth maintaining itself. Instead, his eyes caught on unfamiliar names that reads thus: Lucille Packard Children's Hospital, for $1,247.82. CVS Pharmacy El Camino Real, $892.15. Stanford Medicine Outpatient Center, $1,653.40. University Avenue Florist, $34.50. Ben's hand still on the mouse. He read the list again, slower this time, feeling something cold settle in his chest. No designer boutiques, no luxury restaurants, no indulgent escapes, just hospitals, pharmacies, medical centers, and flowers. His mind flashed back unbidden. Lisa's trembling hands as she wrapped leftovers, the way her voice had broken during that phone call, the tears she'd wiped away so quickly when she thought no one saw. The pieces clicked together with brutal clarity. She hadn't bought for herself at all. The realization struck him like a physical blow. Here was Ben Thompson, a man who'd spent decades watching people scheme and manipulate, who'd been betrayed by partners and abandoned by family, who'd learned to see the angle in every smile and the price tag on every loyalty. And in all that cynicism, he'd forgotten that sacrifice still existed, that some people, when given everything, would use it to save someone else. His hands moved before his mind caught up. He grabbed his phone, dialed his driver. "Sir?" Marcus answered on the first ring. "Find out where Lisa went yesterday," Ben said, his voice tight. "The cook, find out where she is right now." "Right now, sir?" "Now." 20 minutes later, Ben sat in the back of his Tesla as it glided through neighborhoods that existed in a different universe from his Palo Alto estate. They passed East Palo Alto's modest homes, chain-link fences, corner stores with barred windows. The other side of Silicon Valley's golden dream. The contrast wasn't lost on him. He'd built his empire mere miles from people fighting just to survive. Marcus pulled into the hospital parking lot without needing directions. He'd already known. "She's been coming here every evening after a shift, sir," Marcus said quietly. "For months." Ben stepped out into the fading afternoon light, his expensive shoes clicking against pavement worn by 1,000 desperate arrivals. Inside, the hospital smelled of antiseptic and recycled air, of hope stretched thin and prayers whispered in waiting rooms. He followed signs to the pediatric oncology ward, his heart pounding in a way no business negotiation had ever triggered. When he turned the corner, he saw her through the glass. Lisa sat beside a small bed, her blue uniform exchanged for worn jeans and a faded sweater. The boy beside her was tiny, rail-thin, his head smooth and bare. But his eyes were bright as he smiled at something his mother was saying. She held his hand gently, as though he might break, her thumb tracing small circles on his palm. The fresh flowers from University Avenue sat on the bedside table, adding impossible color to the white, sterile world. Ben felt his throat close. Her son. A nurse had appeared beside him, her voice soft with practiced compassion. 8 years old. He was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia 7 months ago. She's been working double shifts, sometimes triple, doing everything she can to keep him in treatment. The nurse paused, studying Ben's face. "That card you gave her, it paid for this week's chemotherapy. It bought him time." Through the glass, Lisa leaned forward and kissed Jamari's forehead. The boy laughed at something, the sound silent through the barrier, but visible in the way his small shoulders shook. Lisa's smile was fierce and fragile all at once. Ben turned away, his vision blurring. For the first time in years, the billionaire who built empires from algorithms, who'd conquered markets and disrupted industries, who'd faced down hostile takeovers and survived corporate warfare, couldn't think of a single thing to say. The rain had started again outside, streaking the windows, but Ben barely noticed as silent tears mixed with the sound of medical equipment and whispered prayers. He'd given her a card. She'd given her son a chance at life. And somehow in that exchange, she'd given Ben something he thought he'd lost forever. A reason to feel again. Ben drove home through rain-slick streets, but he barely registered the journey. His mansion welcomed him with its usual sterile perfection. Climate-controlled air, soft automated lighting, silence, so complete it felt like a vacuum. He poured himself a scotch he didn't drink and stood at the window, watching rain distort the city lights below. Sleep didn't come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Jamari's fragile smile, Lisa's exhausted devotion, the flowers blooming impossibly in that sterile room. The image burned itself into his mind, refusing to fade into the background noise of his conscience. But worse than that, far worse, was the memory it unearthed. His own son, Michael, at 8 years old. Same bright eyes, same eagerness to please, same small hand reaching for his father's attention. Ben remembered the last real conversation they'd had, 3 years ago now. Michael had come to his office, asked him to attend his college graduation. Ben had glanced at his calendar, seen the board meeting scheduled that same weekend, and said, "I'll try, son." He hadn't tried, hadn't even called. Michael's voice on the phone later that week had been calm, final. "I needed you there, Dad. Just once. But I get it now. I never was a priority. I don't think I ever will be." The line had gone dead. Ben had told himself he'd fix it later, after the merger, after the product launch, after the fiscal quarter closed. But later had become 3 years of silence. "I built everything," Ben whispered to his empty reflection, "and lost everyone." The words hung in the air, accusatory and true. He'd conquered Silicon Valley, but couldn't cross the distance to his own son's heart. He'd accumulated billions, but couldn't purchase back a single moment he traded for them. And somehow, a cook who earned in a year what he spent on watches had more wealth than he'd ever possessed. Because she knew what mattered. By dawn, Ben had made his decision. He arrived at the hospital as morning light filtered through the windows, carrying coffee and a resolve that felt foreign in its simplicity. When he entered Jamari's room, Lisa jumped to her feet, her face draining of color. "Mr. Thompson, I'm so sorry. I should have asked permission. The card, I'll pay back every..." "Lisa." Ben raised his hand gently, surprised by the steadiness in his voice. "Stop." She froze, her hands clasped together, knuckles white. "Keep it," he said quietly. "Keep the card, and let me help." "Sir, I can't possibly." "You can," Ben interrupted, softer this time. "You will, because nobody should fight this alone." Lisa's composure shattered. She covered her mouth as tears spilled over, her shoulders shaking with the weight of months of carrying everything by herself. From the bed, Jamari stirred, his small voice cutting through the moment. "Mama, is the nice man making you sad?" Ben approached the bedside, kneeling down to meet Jamari's eyes. Up close, the boy looked even more fragile, but his gaze held surprising strength. "I'm not making her sad, buddy. I'm trying to help make things better. Is that okay with you?" Jamari considered this with the seriousness of a judge, then nodded slowly. "Okay, but only if you're really nice. Mama deserves really nice people." Ben felt something crack in his chest. "She does, and so do you." Over the following days, Ben did what he did best. He solved problems. He contacted Stanford's top pediatric oncologists, arranging consultations. He covered all of Jamari's treatments without hesitation, eliminating the debt that had been crushing Lisa for months. He set up a trust to ensure Jamari's care would continue regardless of what happened. But the moment that changed everything came on a Thursday afternoon. Ben arrived with a package, a portable keyboard, small enough to fit on the hospital tray table. Jamari's eyes went wide when he unwrapped it. "You like music?" Ben asked. "I love it," Jamari whispered, fingers hovering over the keys reverently. "But I never got to learn." "Well," Ben said, sitting beside the bed, "let me show you something." He placed Jamari's small fingers on the keys, guiding them through a simple melody. "Fur Elise," the first piece he'd ever learned. The same piece he taught Michael 2 decades ago, sitting at their grand piano while his son giggled at mistakes and beamed at successful notes. Jamari played hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence, the simple melody filling the hospital room. Lisa watched from the doorway, her hand over her heart. Ben closed his eyes, and for a moment he wasn't in a hospital. He was back in his old house, before the divorce, before the empire, when his son still looked at him like he hung the stars. When music and laughter had filled spaces that money later couldn't. When he opened his eyes, tears were streaming down his face. Jamari finished the melody and looked up at him, concerned. "Did I play it wrong?" "No," Ben managed, his voice thick. "You played it perfectly." Lisa approached quietly, touching Ben's shoulder. "Mr. Thompson." "Ben," he corrected gently. "Just Ben." "Ben," she tried again, the name feeling strange on her lips. "I don't know how to thank you for—" "You already have," he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. Because the card he'd once used to acquire companies and crush competitors had just bought him something infinitely more valuable. It had bought him back his humanity. 6 months changed everything. Ben became a fixture at the hospital, arriving most afternoons with books, games, or simply his presence. He and Jamari developed a ritual, piano lessons that started with simple melodies and grew into something beautiful. The boy had natural talent, his small fingers dancing across the keys with increasing confidence, filling the sterile ward with music that made nurses pause in doorways and other patients smile. On weekends, when Jamari's treatments allowed, Lisa would bring ingredients from home and cook simple meals in the hospital's family kitchen. Ben would sit at the small table, eating her homemade chicken soup and cornbread, and something about those humble meals stirred memories he'd buried. His own mother, decades gone, humming in their modest kitchen, while Sunday dinners simmered on the stove. "You cook like my mother used to," he told Lisa one evening, surprising himself with the admission. She smiled softly. "That's the best compliment you could give me." Warmth had returned to Ben's life, seeping into spaces that had been frozen for years. He laughed more, slept better, began to remember what it felt like to look forward to something beyond quarterly earnings. But the hardest step still waited. One night, Ben sat at his desk for 3 hours, staring at a blank email. He typed and deleted a dozen opening lines before finally settling on the simplest truth, which reads thus: "Michael, I know I have no right to reach out after 3 years of silence. I know I failed you in every way that mattered. But I'm writing anyway, not because I expect forgiveness, but because I finally understand what I lost when I lost you. I've been spending time with a boy your age when I last really knew you, watching him fight for his life, watching his mother fight for him. I realized that I let you slip away while chasing things that never mattered as much as I convinced myself they did. I can't undo the past. I can't give you back the father you deserved. But if you're willing, I'd like to try to be better now, even if it's too late, even if you decide I don't deserve the chance. I miss you, son. I always have. Dad." He hit send before courage failed him. 3 days later, Michael replied, "Coffee? Saturday?" 2 words that felt like a lifeline. They met at a small cafe in San Francisco, neutral territory. Michael had his mother's eyes, but Ben's stubborn jaw. He was 25 now, a software engineer, wearing startup casual jeans and a hoodie that probably cost more than it looked. The first 20 minutes were stilted, careful. They talked about weather, traffic, Michael's job, safe topics that skirted around the crater of hurt between them. Then Michael asked, "Why now?" Ben didn't hide behind excuses. He told him about Lisa, about Jamari, about watching a mother sacrifice everything for her child and realizing what he'd sacrificed his own child for. His voice cracked when he admitted, "I taught him piano, and I remembered teaching you, remembered what I threw away." Michael was quiet for a long moment, studying his coffee. "I can't just forget." "I don't expect you to," Ben interrupted gently. I'm asking if we can start somewhere. Anywhere." Michael's jaw worked, emotions warring across his face. Finally, he nodded. "Okay, we can try." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't redemption. But it was a bridge, fragile and tentative, where before there'd been only silence. 2 months later, Dr. Patel delivered news that made Lisa collapse into a chair, sobbing with relief. Jamari's scans were clear. The cancer was in remission. The celebration in that hospital room was modest but radiant. Ben brought flowers, a massive arrangement that barely fit on the windowsill. Lisa made Jamari's favorite cookies. The boy sat up in bed, stronger now, hair beginning to grow back in soft dark curls, and played a full piece on his keyboard, the fur release he'd mastered through months of practice. When he finished, Ben applauded until his hands hurt. Jamari beamed, a smile so bright it seemed to illuminate the entire room. "I did it," he exclaimed. "Did you hear? I didn't miss a single note." "I heard, buddy," Ben said, his voice thick. "You were perfect." Watching Jamari laugh, watching Lisa cry happy tears, Ben felt something he hadn't experienced in over a decade, pure, uncomplicated joy. Later, as they packed up Jamari's things for his first night home in months, Lisa pulled Ben aside. "I'll never forget what you did for us," she said quietly. "You saved his life. You saved both our lives." Ben shook his head, touching her shoulder gently. "You don't owe me gratitude, Lisa. You reminded me how to be human. You showed me that everything I'd been chasing was worthless compared to what I'd lost." He paused, finding the right words. "You and Jamar, you gave me back my heart." Lisa hugged him then, and Ben hugged her back, feeling more whole than he had in years. That evening, Ben sat in his study. The same leather chair, the same glass walls. Rain fell softly outside, just like it had that night months ago when everything changed. But this time, the mansion wasn't silent. From down the hall came the sound of piano music. Jamari and Michael, who'd started visiting on weekends, playing a duet they'd been practicing. Their laughter drifted through the house, filling spaces that had echoed empty for too long. Ben closed his eyes and listened, a smile touching his lips. Sometimes what breaks your heart doesn't destroy you. Sometimes it teaches you how to live again. If you believe that kindness still has the power to change the world, that second chances matter, and that the smallest acts of compassion can transform lives, then please subscribe and share the story. Help us spread more tales that heal hearts and remind us of the goodness still left in humanity. Because these stories, they're not just entertainment. They're reminders of who we can choose to be. Thank you.